discuss marijuana and whether it is feasible to legalize or decriminalize. With me on the panel today are the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago National Alcohol and Drug Abuse Prevention Program, and he's Selwyn Bajan.
Got it.
Good, I got that correct. And to his right is Ms. Paula Atkinson, who is program officer with the National Council on Substance Abuse. And we are more familiar with the terms of Verdun House and Marina House. With us is the CEO of, this is their correct title, the Substance Abuse Foundation. And welcome, Marita Carrington.
Thank you.
Mr. Bajan, I'd like to start with you. Just so that we understand what it is that we are talking about, could you describe for us first what marijuana is? And
Okay.
then you can take your discussion from there.
Sure.
So that we know where we're at.
Okay, well, I'm not the present chairman of NADAP, National Alcohol and Drug Dependency Program. I was chairman for about 10 years. I was also the executive director of New Life Ministries, which gave birth to a lot of recovery centers in the Caribbean sense. So I've been involved in this. I was trained by the United Nations in the whole area of substance abuse prevention and recognition. So I come with many, many years of experience in the field, just hands-on experience. To say what marijuana is very simple. It's a herbal substance that a person can become addicted to. A plant, a leaf, a natural herbal substance that people can become addicted to very easily.
Right.
In becoming addicted to marijuana, there are some very real and recognizable transformations that take place in the individual who's using or is addicted to marijuana.
And this is personality or greater than that in terms of the psycho makeup.
Right. The actual personality, it's a good thing that you asked it like that. The actual personality is transformed. The behaviors are transformed. The interests or non-interest in things are transformed. Something happens to the brain. So a whole new person emerges very almost naturally and invisibly from the use of this herbal substance.
I want you to distinguish, if you can, between use and abuse.
Yes. The use is someone who actually smokes this cigarette, this marijuana thing. But they don't have to smoke all the time. So they might use it socially, they might use it casually on the beach or somewhere quietly. They're using it from time to time. The abuser is the one who is now addicted.
Right.
And it's now a habit that they can't get rid of. And they must now go to the treatment centers and get some help to be able to stop being addicted to it. Abuse comes out of the addictive role. I now cannot do without it, so I am abusing it, so to speak. I have a need for it, and I will be using it all the time and regularly.
And is it with use or abuse that you see these personality changes?
Use and abuse. In abuse it's far worse because it's now a concretized set of behaviors that are there permanent. In use, you'll see it after it's been used, few minutes, today, next few hours, you will see the personality transformation. It's when it now have become a habit and there's a concretized personality, then we say, okay, so that is a marijuana smoker, that is a ganja man or whatever. But it happens even with casual use, the transformation.
Okay. And in the Trinidadian context,
Right.
what have you noticed in your years of practice around the transformational aspect?
Right.
What have you noticed in relation to that?
Many, many years ago, many years ago, decades ago, a few people recognized that this was going to lead to catastrophe in a social sense, in an economic sense, and so on. And we came together. I was part of the initial group coming together to start alerting the national community to what can happen, what the trends would be. And we did something as chairman of NADAP. We did a lot of sensitization and information and education programs and printed material and so on. But the consistency died after a while because it takes funding and money and staff, and the consistency of spreading the information died. And we just saw the emergence over the last few years of something incredible. The use of marijuana, and then marijuana is a gateway drug. It leads to other drugs, higher drugs, to the black cigarette with cocaine and heroin. So we saw an escalation in the use, and we saw that the mafia, the groups that wanted to propagate and sell, and they made it turn it into a business, became very wise, and they understood and they became strategic how to get it to the young children primary school level, how to get it to the children in the secondary school, how to work it into the university and the tertiary level institutions, how to get it into the corporations. They became very strategic, and Trinidad cannot reverse it now.
Okay.
And out of that's one thing.
Sure.
In this process, gangs are formed. We want to control this area with this school and this population of people. We want this area, and gangs are formed. And in that forming of the gang culture, there's a lot of criminality, a lot of death, a lot of real violence emerges from it, and we are now stuck there.
I want to probe two different things. Let's start with the first one. The title of your organization also involves alcohol abuse.
Yes.
What, in your opinion, is the difference, if any, between alcohol abuse and drug abuse?
Okay. Alcohol modifies behavior, slows down the system, can lead to alcoholism with specific illnesses, cancer, lung, liver, specific illnesses. In the Caribbean, certainly in Trinidad, many homes have been destroyed and family life destroyed by alcoholics and alcohol abuse. Alcohol abuse has its own story, what it does to the body, what it does to the mind, what it does to behavior. Very different from marijuana. For example, once you've used marijuana, the marijuana influence, chemical influence in the body, stays for 30 to 36 days in the system. With alcohol, 2-3 days, it's gone. Next morning it can go. You can wash it out of the system. You can get rid of it, it can go. But in marijuana, and a lot of people don't know this, it stays for 30 to 36 days, 35 days. It stays a long time. It's active in the system, in the brain, in the heart, on the hormones, it's active. Marijuana goes, the THC in marijuana goes and affects the fatty tissue in the body, including the fatty tissue between brain cells. And it makes it brittle and dry. So when people are saying I'm high, it's different from alcohol. When people say I'm high and I'm floating and I'm feeling whatever, it's because the brain cells are not connecting, because the fatty tissue is now dried up and brittle with the marijuana use. That stays in a decreasing level, yes, for 36 days. But imagine you've gone on the weekend and done it again. Right. And so the marijuana has this longer lasting detrimental effect.
But the social effect is the same for both?
No, it's not the same for both.
Okay,
because,
explain.
Well, with the alcohol, there are behaviors at home, and children of alcoholics are wounded psychologically and so on. Marijuana has a lot more effects. It has mind-body coordination, deterioration. It has... That only happens with the alcohol temporarily. You can't drive the night you're drunk, but next day you're cool. But with the marijuana, for a whole month it's there in the system, creating the imbalance between mind and body. Marijuana leads to a motivation, the opposite of motivation. People become dull. With alcohol, they can move on the next day, the next week. So you find young people or people under the influence of marijuana are now quite dull in the way they are behaving and their motivational attitudes. The marijuana changes the hormones in the human body. You know, we have women who come to us at our rehab centers, and their breasts are shrunk, and their organs have changed. Their hormone systems have changed, not from alcohol, from marijuana. When this kind of hormone confusion happens in the body from the use of marijuana, you think you're now gay. You have sexual confusion. Marijuana is a gateway drug, and this is to me the most dangerous thing. I don't know about the exact situation in Barbados, but I could tell you in Trinidad, when you have now become comfortable with marijuana use, you then go to the black cigarette, which we say was invented in Trinidad, which is a rock of cocaine in the marijuana, and you're now hooked with the cocaine. You then will graduate to cocaine use, and you just think it. In this beautiful human body, man is made in the image and likeness of the divine and image of God. And this body is now a mixture of cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, and then a dabbling. You've changed the chemistry. A whole person has changed. So marijuana as a gateway drug is, to my mind, the most dangerous aspect. Not everybody goes to this mixture of the higher stuff, but in Trinidad, a lot of people have become destroyed as human beings in the beautiful sense because of this new person that evolves.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Bajan. Ms. Atkinson, again, your focus is in relation to developing programs to deal with substance abuse. If you could first introduce yourself and the scope of your works, and then carry on the conversation from where Mr. Bajan left off.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and good evening. I work with the National Council on Substance Abuse. We are the drug authority here in Barbados as it relates to the prevention and creation of programs to address all types of legal and illegal substances. When we speak about marijuana, in our Barbadian experience, in the first instance, many people don't refer to marijuana by that name. So I will speak to some of the more street names. Herb, jam, Vinci, Colombian gold, hydro, exotic, weed, ganja. These are some of the terms. Sensimilia. These are some of the terms that a lot of people might hear and might not recognize are other names for marijuana. What are we realizing with the marijuana phenomenon? Yes, marijuana is derived from a plant, the cannabis sativa plant, and it remains an illegal substance here in Barbados. That is something that is not necessarily accepted by some portions of our society. What we've been seeing in terms of our research and our programming and work with other agencies in this area is that many of our young persons under the age of 35, especially our males, young males, are the ones who are being most impacted by this substance. Marijuana is much more powerful than it was 15 to even 30 years ago. And therefore, what is available, primarily coming from persons pushing on the street and in other locations, is a much stronger drug. That has implications for the impact, the psychosocial, to cut it down to brass tacks. What is happening in terms of the impact of marijuana on the brain? I know Mr. Bajan was talking very in-depthly about this, and we are seeing this in terms of more and more younger persons under the age of 35 seeking treatment for marijuana abuse and addiction. It is happening. It is real. Primarily, most of our males are impacted more so than females. And what we are seeing is that age cohort at secondary school. 13 and a half is the average age at which most of our young people are experimenting and becoming first involved with marijuana. This has far-reaching consequences because these are young persons whose brains are still developing, whose bodies are still developing, who are going through that transition of from young children to becoming mature adults, and it's having an impact on their brain development and by extension their behavior. So in schools, we're seeing the repercussions. We're seeing it in terms of children being suspended from school, families being impacted, young persons getting involved in criminal activity, and even our Royal Barbados Police Force. This is occupying their attention tremendously. The possession of marijuana continues to be one of the highest drug offenses reported here in Barbados. So these are real issues that we're coping with. At the NCSA, the National Council on Substance Abuse, our business is prevention. We recognize that we have to be dynamic, especially in the face of diminishing resources, and we work continuously with a number of agencies, including my colleague Marietta with the Substance Abuse Foundation, because we recognize that we have to infiltrate through education and life skills development, and that is one of the primary areas of focus for us, because we recognize that prevention is better than cure. Yes, persons will be affected, but we have to intervene at earlier and earlier ages, not only with children, but in terms of providing education through the schools and in communities, to ensure that people have not only accurate information, but they have skills that they can use. What happens when I'm pressured to use drugs, to smoke a spliff, to take a pull? How can I cope with that peer pressure? How can I cope with that pressure to try it, to just chillax? So these are the types of things that we're involved in. We continue, as I mentioned, to collaborate. But marijuana presents a very serious social and even economic situation for us here in Barbados. And we continue to, yes.
I'm glad you mentioned economic.
Yes.
No, the focus of this discourse is whether we should consider legalizing or decriminalizing. And of course, one of the contemplations would be whether or not there would be any economic benefits from so doing. Now, I don't want you to touch on the medical side of it at this point. I just wish you to speak to the economic aspects of it and whether or not, in your view, it would have any impact on the abuse situation as opposed to the use. Because we appreciate that the use would be wider than the abuse. But focusing on the abuse side, do you think that an element of governmental intervention, whether it be complete legalizing or decriminalizing to a certain extent, would have some impact on the work that you do in terms of dealing with the abuse aspect?
Well, first let me say that certainly the whole issue of marijuana and the conversation around decriminalization and legalization continue to occupy the attention of authorities. Certainly our Attorney General and personnel at the Ministry of Health engage in continuous discussion with the board and management of the NCSA and the wider stakeholders. Whilst it remains illegal and our statutes are such, we do recognize that research is important. There is and has been a continuous movement in the international sphere and trends in other societies. Even here in the Caribbean, we've seen examples of Jamaica moving towards legalization. However, in Barbados, whilst it is occupying the attention of the authorities, we recognize that we need to really have facts before such policy directives or any other policy changes are made. And currently that's where we are. Certainly seeking to ensure that we have the adequate research to inform where exactly we should be going. We do recognize in other jurisdictions that have legalized marijuana, initial economic growth and increase in some sectors, certainly in the case of Colorado and other states in the USA. However, again, as smaller societies with less economic resources in the first instance, the peculiarities of our intricate societies here in the Caribbean and by no exception Barbados, we have to address this issue very seriously. even in the absence of that credible research at this point, anecdotally, from being in the field and working with colleagues, we already see the impact that is having on younger and younger members of our society. We recognize the pressure and the stressors on our treatment services, on our health services, and therefore,
prison service.
and thank you, the persons incarcerated as well. And we have been seeing more in terms of an increase in the number of males presenting for treatment, persons who have become incarcerated for marijuana-related criminal offenses. And there is a trend that we're seeing in our existing research in terms of what we refer to as polydrug use. So the combination of marijuana with other substances, harder substances, more detrimental substances. So already we recognize that there is a trend towards a more negative social and socio-economic considerations cannot just be in terms of a dollar sign and looking at it from a simple economic perspective. We have to look at a total system in terms of how can this potentially impact the lives of our citizens, our social services, our treatment services, or medical services, etc. And again, we have to have credible information before any such policy changes are even considered.
I'd just like to
Which is a neat segue. I do beg your pardon, but we need to include Ms. Carrington in our conversation. And having spoken about the actual treatment, you are involved now in the hands-on treatment, not just the development of programs, but the actual implementation of programs with Verdun House and Marina House. So please explain for us the nature of your works and what you are finding, what trends you are uncovering from your angle.
Okay, what I will start off by saying that in 2015, our clinicians began to notice a very troubling trend, speaking directly to some of the comments that Paul Yvette made with respect to the individuals who were coming into treatment. And we don't have national statistics, but what we do have are statistics relating to treatment, because I do believe that we're perhaps one of the few organizations that have been collecting information on our treatment from day one. So I can tell you who client 001 is, and we're now at 900 and close to 1,000, that person. So the conversation I'm going to have today is going to be embedded within the information that has come out of our statistics. So in year 2000, we had 3% individuals who presented with marijuana. And let's go to 2005, that number was 18%. In 2008, it was 24%. So you're beginning to see where that is going. But more troubling, and we spoke about this earlier, was that the effect was on what we call the 18 to 25 age range. So in preparation for this conversation, I asked our IT guy to pull some statistics for me. And what that presented is perhaps even more troubling. It is now 32% at 2017, and to speak to both of your comments, it is now polyusers. So almost every person who is now presenting at Verdun, because we've been collecting for the male population from inception, marijuana is just one of the substances that has been used. I'm not a clinician, so I will self-disclose, but what I have heard our clinicians indicate is that these clients who are presenting with us are now coming with the psychotic effects of using. And there's a lot of noise and debate around, well, why one person will get sick and the other person don't get sick. You know, I have gone to school and I've had 2 spliffs and nothing happened to me, and you have all that conversation. The clinicians will have to tell you and the science folks, when they get in the seats, will have to explain to us why one person may get sick as opposed to another. So I'm not even going to go down that path. But in terms of the statistics,
Yes.
it has gone from 5% to 30% over this period.
I want to analyze the statistics though.
Mhm.
When Verdun House started, was it the only treatment option outside of the psychiatric hospital?
Yes.
Okay. So
Residential.
this was,
We're the
this
only-
was not,
No, we're
because
the
there were
only,
other options at a time.
and there's still options, but at this point, we are the only residential treatment center in Barbados for men
Right.
and for women.
Right.
And the beauty of this is that we are now beginning to collect information on women
Right.
that can be analyzed over a 4 or 5 year period.
So have you actually analyzed it? Because you've collected it, but I want to know if there has been any analysis of the information.
We're actually in the middle of completing a research project that speaks to not just marijuana, but the first reason we're doing it is to evaluate our program. Is it effective? You know, should we be doing more, less? What are the components of that? But more important, to look to see what is happening within the treatment arena. How can we respond in a more proactive way? And that research is being led by Dr. Jareen Griffith, who is our clinical psychologist. And she came on board 2-3 years ago in recognition that addiction is not now a pure alcoholic or pure cocaine user, but is now coming with what the experts are referring to as a co-occurring disorder. So you have an addiction to whatever that is. It could be sugar, it could be Coke, it could be coffee, it could be chocolate, it could be shopping, it could be sex, it could be whatever that addiction is. And also the changes in the brain that takes place, and what are the illnesses that are emerging, and how as a treatment center can we manage that.
So you deal with both legal and illegal substance abuse?
Addiction, any form
Any
of
form.
yes.
Okay. Well,
But
thank
this
you all.
this was a very troubling trend, and therefore it created the conditions for us to do something about it. And we actually
Yes.
produced 2 magazines on it.
Yes. I will await the analysis, because the raw data can be interpreted in several different ways, but the analysis itself will give us a little bit more meat on the bones. I want to thank all of you for your contribution to this discussion, and I do hope that we have the opportunity to have a further chat, whether formally or informally, in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you for
You're
having
very
me.
welcome. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Certainly, we extend our thanks to our panel, Ms. Tucker, Dr. Chase, and I will not call you by the wrong name again, and Dr. Harvey. Thank you very much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us.